Most women never realize the sheer gravity their silence carries. Silence is not emptiness. It is not weakness. It is not withdrawal. It is presence made unbearable to a man who cannot master his own shadow. In silence, a woman becomes a mirror, and to the man who stands before it, every flaw, every insecurity, every unhealed wound he has tried to bury comes rushing to the surface. Jung knew this well. What is not made conscious appears in our lives as fate. A woman's silence becomes that fate for a man who is secretly possessed by it. He will not say it aloud. He may not even admit it to himself, but he feels it. The weight of a quiet that speaks louder than words, the echo of restraint that unsettles his restless ego. For the man who lives off validation, chatter, and noise, your silence is like a shadow pressing against his chest. It is as if you are pulling him into a world where he can no longer hide behind performance. He senses that something inside him is being exposed, and it terrifies him. Have you ever noticed the way a man becomes restless when you choose not to answer? His jokes lose their rhythm. His gestures falter. His confidence begins to stutter. That is not mere insecurity. That is possession. The grip of his unconscious struggling against the archetypal power you embody. Your silence strips him of his masks. It refuses to play along with his game. It draws him back to himself, to the places he has avoided. And he cannot bear it. For in silence there is no mirror of flattery, no balm for his fragile ego. Instead, he meets what he has tried to escape, the truth of his own inadequacy, his unresolved wounds, his dependency on being seen. Jung would call it the confrontation with the shadow. And few men are prepared to face it. Most retreat, lash out, or grow strangely obsessive. They circle around you, attempting to provoke a reaction, as if breaking your silence would restore their sense of power. But silence is not a void. It is a force. It is the feminine withdrawing her energy, refusing to feed the unworthy, refusing to validate the unprepared. And when a man is secretly possessed by it, his very demeanor betrays him. He becomes haunted by your absence even in your presence. He becomes intoxicated by what he cannot control. He becomes a prisoner, not of you, but of what you have awakened within him. This is why silence is not passive. It is an active stance, a boundary forged in steel. And when wielded with intention, it reveals truths that words would only conceal. The man's reaction is the confession. His unease is the evidence. His obsession is the shadow unveiled. And you, the woman who chooses silence, stand at the threshold of archetypal power. You are no longer merely reacting, you are revealing. And whether he can withstand that revelation is the measure of his depth. There is a strange paradox in the way silence works upon a man's psyche. Outwardly, it seems like nothing. A pause, an absence of words, a refusal to explain. Yet within him, it is everything. It is thunder disguised as stillness, an earthquake that rattles the fragile scaffolding of his ego. He feels it not only in his mind, but in his body. His chest tightens. His breath grows shallow. He becomes restless in his skin, as if silence itself is a presence crowding him, demanding he face the truth. This is because silence does not simply remove sound. It removes illusion. A man who is used to dominating with charm, with persuasion, with a flood of words, suddenly finds himself powerless. His usual weapons fall useless at his feet. Your refusal to feed his narrative becomes a mirror that reflects only his hunger. And hunger, when denied, quickly mutates into obsession. Observe how he begins to hover, circling the edges of your stillness like a moth drawn to flame. He might laugh too loudly, as if to fill the void. He might prod with casual questions, attempting to coax a spark of reaction. And if none comes, he may retreat into brooding silence of his own, though his is not sovereign, but desperate. His silence is a prison, while yours is freedom. Jung would say he has projected his anima upon you, the unconscious feminine within him that he cannot integrate. Your silence forces that projection back into his awareness, and he does not know what to do with it. For many men, this is unbearable. They crave the comfort of constant validation, the reassurance that their identity is solid, their authority unquestioned. But silence erodes that facade. It whispers, "You are not as certain as you pretend." It suggests she does not need you to define her reality. And in this suggestion lies terror. Because if you cannot be moved by his performance, then what power does he truly have? Have you noticed how quickly irritation arises in such moments? How his charm sharpens into sarcasm, his warmth chills into subtle punishment. He may accuse you of indifference, of arrogance, of cruelty. Yet beneath the accusation is fear, the fear that you have touched the wound he cannot name. He is possessed not by you, but by his own unconscious screaming through the cracks, and so the silence deepens. What appears as nothingness between you is, in truth, a battleground. On one side stands his ego, frantic, scrambling for recognition. On the other stands the deeper reality, your refusal to compromise your power, your choice to remain still. And in this stand, you embody something more ancient than any romance or quarrel. You embody the archetype of the wise feminine, the keeper of mystery, the one who does not beg to be understood, but allows the other to wrestle with his own shadow. This is why silence is feared. This is why silence is worshipped. It is not absence. It is the presence of a woman who has learned to withhold her energy until it is deserved. And in the soul of the man, this ignites both terror and desire. He may not understand it, he may not name it, but he feels it, burning. What emerges next is the undeniable truth that silence does not simply unsettle a man. It exposes him. When words are stripped away, when the rhythm of exchange collapses into stillness, his entire posture becomes a confession. Watch carefully, and you will see it. His eyes dart, searching for anchors that are no longer there. His body shifts, restless, unable to rest in the quiet you hold. His tone sharpens, or else he grows strangely submissive, as if he cannot decide whether to fight or surrender. This is the essence of possession. He is no longer free to act from center. Instead, he is pulled by forces within him he does not control. Jung would name them complexes, psychic fragments born of old wounds, unmet needs, forgotten betrayals. Your silence calls them forth. Without even touching him, you summon his ghosts. And suddenly, he is not simply a man in conversation. He is a boy seeking his mother's reassurance. He is the abandoned lover demanding proof of worth. He is the fearful child who once equated silence with rejection. All of it surfaces, and he cannot escape. And here lies the power. Silence does not give him what he wants, but what he needs. It is the mirror of truth that no amount of noise can distort. For the woman who commands silence is not withholding to punish. She is revealing the gap between who he is and who he pretends to be. If he collapses under its weight, it is because he has not yet built the strength to stand naked before his own reflection. But there are others who do not collapse. They chase. Have you seen it? The way some men, rather than retreat, lean in closer, desperate to pierce the wall of your stillness. They grow obsessive, showering you with attention, questions, gifts, declarations, not out of genuine devotion, but out of compulsion. They must break your silence because your silence unmasks their dependency. And in that moment, you cease to be simply a woman in their lives. You become the axis around which their self-worth spins. This is where the danger lies. For obsession, disguised as love, can become a chain. A man who is possessed by your silence may try to bind you with promises, with guilt, with attempts to provoke jealousy or compliance. His unconscious tells him, if she speaks, I am real again. If she answers, I exist. And so he does whatever he must to pull you back into his orbit. But what he does not understand is that you are not his to command. Your silence is not an absence of affection. It is the presence of sovereignty. In that sovereignty, you embody what the Stoics understood, that freedom is not found in controlling others, but in mastering oneself. Epictetus wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Your silence, then, is not cruelty. It is the silent reminder of this eternal truth. If he cannot master his reaction to it, then he is still enslaved. And so, while he wrestles with shadows, you remain still. You do not rush to soothe him, nor do you bend to appease his fears. You stand unwavering in the knowledge that a woman who is whole does not need to fill every silence with explanation. She lets silence speak for her. In the depth of that silence, something ancient stirs. A man begins to realize, though often without words, that he is no longer dealing with the ordinary. He is confronting a force older than his reason, deeper than his charm. It is the anima within him, the inner feminine, projected onto you, ignited by your refusal to play the role he unconsciously demands. Your silence cracks the mask of his persona, that carefully constructed image he wears before the world, and what spills out is not confidence, but fracture. You see, silence is an alchemical fire. It melts away the superficial and forces confrontation with the raw metal of the psyche. Jung spoke of individuation as the process of integrating one's unconscious into wholeness. Yet most men avoid this lifelong task, preferring distraction, dominance, or denial. But when a woman chooses silence, she becomes the reluctant midwife of that confrontation. She drags his shadow to the surface without lifting a finger. That is why he trembles. That is why he grows erratic. That is why he is both drawn to you and terrified of you. The silence unsettles him because it does not confirm his control. He cannot predict it. He cannot manipulate it. And in that unpredictability, he tastes the unfamiliar sensation of his own smallness. His inflated ego, accustomed to applause and validation, is suddenly humbled. And whether he admits it or not, that humility feels like death. For to the ego, silence is annihilation. It whispers, "You are not as important as you believe." It murmurs, "Your power does not reach her." But here is the paradox. What feels like death to the ego is the very threshold of transformation for the soul. Many men will resist it, thrash against it, project blame onto you. Yet a rare few will pause and recognize the gift hidden inside the discomfort. They will sense that your silence is not hostility, but initiation. It is the invitation to grow, to see themselves stripped of performance and pretense. Have you ever witnessed it? That flicker in a man's eyes when he finally surrenders to the quiet, when instead of filling the void with words, he begins to listen. Not to you, but to himself. In that moment, he ceases to be possessed by your silence. Instead, he begins to integrate what it reveals. And that is the difference between the one who collapses and the one who evolves. Your silence, then, becomes a gate. For the man unwilling to confront his shadow, it is a wall that drives him to frustration, obsession, or retreat. For the man ready to awaken, it is a threshold leading to deeper strength. Either way, you remain unchanged, untouched, steady. The silence is not about him. It is about you reclaiming your energy, refusing to squander it on noise, choosing instead to embody presence. This is why silence feels so dangerous to him. It does not weaken you, it strengthens you. It does not make you invisible, it makes you untouchable. And in this realization lies the secret that every woman must know. Silence is not the absence of power. Silence is the presence of power at its most concentrated. As the silence deepens, its effects on him become unmistakable. His entire demeanor betrays the fact that something within him is unraveling. Words once used to dominate now fall flat. The stories he tells, the jokes he rehearses, the charm he once wielded like a sword, all of it begins to sound hollow, even to himself. He senses, though he cannot articulate it, that he is no longer in control of the stage. He is an actor who has forgotten his lines while the audience, you, remains motionless, unyielding, silent. This is where possession takes on its most haunting form. The silence you hold becomes an echo chamber for his inner voice, amplifying his insecurities until they roar. He projects his fears onto you, convinced that your quiet conceals judgment, disappointment, or disdain. Yet in truth, what he feels is not your condemnation, but his own. Jung taught that projection is the unconscious, thrusting itself outward, forcing us to meet in others what we refuse to see within. And so, the man possessed by your silence is not battling you. He is battling himself. Have you noticed how he shifts between extremes? One moment he is restless, seeking your attention with nervous laughter, compliments, or sudden outbursts of energy. The next, he withdraws into a brooding gloom, punishing you with his absence. These swings are not about you. They are the pendulum of his inner conflict, swinging wildly between the fear of being unseen and the terror of being exposed. Your silence has cornered him, and like an animal trapped, he lashes out in desperation. But the wise woman knows this truth. She is not responsible for soothing the turmoil her silence reveals. To break the stillness too soon would be to rob him of the very medicine he needs. For silence is not a weapon meant to wound, but a mirror meant to awaken. If he cannot endure the reflection, then his readiness for you was an illusion all along. This is the hidden gift of silence. It separates the men who merely desire you from the men who are prepared for you. The first seek comfort in constant validation. They crumble when denied the endless nourishment of attention. The second, though unsettled at first, slowly begin to turn inward. They allow the silence to strip them of their masks, to reveal the fragility beneath, and in that revelation, they find the seeds of growth. The Stoics understood this discipline of stillness. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." So too, many men waste themselves in noise, filling every void with chatter, every pause with performance. But your silence, unflinching and sovereign, denies him the chance to waste. It insists on substance. It insists on depth. It insists on truth. And so he is left to decide. Will he remain enslaved by his restlessness, forever trying to conquer the silence you command? Or will he allow himself to be shaped by it, to find within himself the solidity that can stand beside you without fear? That choice is his alone. Your role is not to answer, not to explain, not to soothe, Your role is to remain, still, sovereign, whole. There comes a point when his struggle against your silence no longer looks like resistance, but like surrender. He cannot keep the mask from slipping. His posture loosens, his tone falters, and his eyes, once so certain, begin to betray the boy beneath the man. In those moments, you can almost see it, the archetype of the wounded masculine, the fragment of him that was never allowed to mature, standing naked in the presence of your restraint. Silence does what no argument could. It bypasses his defenses, dismantles his illusions, and pierces straight into the structures of his identity. This is why some men become furious, even panicked. They are not angry at you, they are terrified of themselves. Your stillness is the key that unlocks a prison door they had sealed long ago, and now the shadows rush out, uncontrolled. Jung would have called it the eruption of the unconscious, the moment when repressed contents of the psyche overwhelm the fragile ego. Have you ever watched how desperately he tries to restore order in those moments? He may attempt to provoke you, to spark conflict, because even conflict feels safer than silence. He may try to seduce you with sudden tenderness because seduction restores the illusion of control. Or he may retreat, punishing you with distance, hoping your discomfort will break before his. Yet none of it truly touches you. For when a woman knows her silence, she becomes untouchable. She ceases to be reactive and instead embodies something elemental, like the moon, unbothered by the tides it controls. It is in this untouchability that the deepest possession occurs. He is no longer simply unsettled. He is haunted. Even when you are not present, he carries the echo of your silence within him. It follows him into his work, into his relationships, into his solitude. He replays your stillness in his mind, grasping for meaning, seeking an answer that never comes. He wonders what you are thinking, what you are feeling, why you will not yield. And in this wondering, he becomes ensnared. You have taken nothing from him, yet he feels as though everything has slipped through his hands. This is the power Jung spoke of when he warned of anima possession. A man who cannot integrate the feminine within himself becomes obsessed with the feminine outside himself. Your silence awakens this very obsession. It reveals the emptiness in him, the hunger he has long ignored, and suddenly he cannot rest until it is filled. But here lies the cruel paradox. Silence cannot be filled. It can only be endured, integrated, transformed. And so, his fate depends not on your response, but on his own courage. Will he allow your silence to crush him into resentment, driving him into cycles of blame and obsession? Or will he allow it to purify him, to strip away the ego's demand for control and open him to humility, to depth, to truth? For the woman who wields silence wisely knows this. She does not need to demand transformation. She only needs to remain sovereign. Silence does the rest. It is the fire that consumes the false, leaving only what is real. The longer silence lingers, the clearer its hierarchy becomes. It is not you who bends beneath its weight. It is he. For the woman who commands silence does not merely fall quiet. She withdraws the very energy that sustains the masculine ego. Her refusal to answer, to explain, to soften the edges of his discomfort places him before a stark mirror. And in that mirror, the truth is unveiled. He needs her far more than she needs him. This realization terrifies him because it inverts the order he has relied upon. The charm, the wit, the dominance, all of it collapses under the force of absence. He begins to see that his entire sense of power was conditional, dependent on her willingness to feed it, And when that willingness is withdrawn, he faces what the Stoics called the test of self-possession. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Yet most men fail this test. Instead of turning inward, they grasp outward, desperate to reassert the illusion of control. This is why silence so often provokes extremes. One man may flood her with attention, gifts, or promises, hoping to force open what has closed. Another may turn cold, punishing her with withdrawal, attempting to make her feel the same void that unsettles him. Another still may grow manipulative, weaving stories, playing on her empathy, anything to fracture her resolve. But all of these responses are the same confession. He is possessed. Possessed not by her, but by the emptiness within him that her silence has revealed. And yet, here lies the deeper paradox. For as much as he fears the silence, he is drawn to it. Like a moth circling flame, he cannot look away. There is something intoxicating about a woman who does not scramble to appease, who does not explain herself into submission, who does not fear the discomfort of his discontent. She becomes rare, radiant, set apart from the noise of those who beg to be chosen. In her silence, she does not chase, she commands. For you, this power is not about games or cruelty. It is about sovereignty. It is about remembering that your worth does not rise or fall with another's validation. Your silence becomes the boundary between you and his projections, between your truth and his illusions. You are no longer the stage on which he performs his worth. You are the mountain against which his echoes return to him. And as those echoes grow louder, he must face the essential choice, either to run from the silence, forever chasing women who will soothe him with noise, or to embrace it as the crucible of transformation. Few men have the courage to choose the latter, but those who do grow. They discover within themselves a strength not dependent on constant reassurance, a groundedness that can stand beside a sovereign woman without fear. And if he cannot, then he reveals himself unworthy of your energy. For silence is not the absence of love. It is the measure of it. It reveals who is able to meet you in stillness, and who is only chasing the sound of his own ego reflected back. Silence, when prolonged, becomes more than a private exchange. It becomes mythic. It awakens something archetypal within the male psyche, something older than words, something that reaches back to the first stories humanity ever told. For in every culture, the feminine has been portrayed as mystery. The oracle who speaks not in chatter but in riddles, the goddess who withdraws into her temple, the muse whose absence drives kings to madness and poets to creation. Your silence is not merely yours. It is the echo of that eternal feminine mystery, and he feels it in his bones even if he cannot name it. This is why he circles you, restless and unsettled. He feels both the wound and the pull. To the uninitiated man, silence feels like rejection. But to the man who dares to look deeper, it feels like initiation. He senses that something sacred is being demanded of him, that he must shed his vanity, his posturing, his need for noise, if he is to approach the depth you embody. Yet he hesitates, because transformation is never painless. It feels like death, and in many ways, it is. Have you seen it? The way his defenses begin to crumble, not through confrontation, but through exhaustion. The way his arrogance softens into confusion, and confusion into vulnerability. In those moments, he stands on the edge of the Jungian underworld, the descent into shadow. Your silence has escorted him there. He must now choose whether to descend or to retreat back into distraction. And here is the secret most women overlook. Silence is not absence. It is invitation. It is not punishment. It is threshold. By withholding words, you are not pushing him away. You are offering him the chance to step into depth. But only he can take that step. You cannot walk it for him. If he resists, he will spiral into obsession, mistaking his possession for the passion. If he accepts, he will discover something rare, a wholeness not defined by your response but by his own inner reconciliation. This is the crucible of love as Jung understood it. Not a merging of halves, but a union of two complete beings. Your silence becomes the test of his completeness. Can he hold his ground in the face of your mystery? Can he sit with discomfort without demanding you relieve it? Can he remain present without demanding you fill the void? Few men can. But those who can are no longer possessed. They are transformed. For in that transformation lies the true union of masculine and feminine. The man who withstands silence becomes a man who no longer seeks to dominate, nor collapses into dependency. He becomes steady, capable of meeting you as an equal, not as a beggar for attention. He learns what the Stoics preached, that freedom comes not from controlling another, but from mastering oneself. And you, the woman, remain sovereign through it all. You are not diminished by his turmoil, nor exalted by his obsession. You simply stand, embodying the timeless truth that silence is not emptiness, but power condensed. In time, the silence does something neither of you expected. It redefines the battlefield. No longer is it about words withheld or explanations denied. It becomes about essence, about who truly stands firm when illusions dissolve. For silence, like water, wears down the stone of pretense. It erodes the surface-level confidence and reveals the sediment of character beneath. And once revealed, that character cannot be hidden again. The man possessed by your silence begins to see his own reflection more clearly. Though he resists it with all his might, he may feel humiliated, stripped of power, as if he has been exposed. But humiliation is merely the ego's reaction to truth. Beneath it lies the opportunity for humility, the capacity to see oneself without distortion. Jung understood this as the doorway to individuation. Only when the mask cracks can the authentic self begin to emerge. But here is the paradox that unsettles him most. The more he resists your silence, the more bound he becomes to it. The more he rages against it, the deeper its hooks sink into him. He may storm away, but he will think of you in the quiet of the night. He may distract himself with noise, with others, with endless stimulation. But he will feel the echo of the stillness he could not conquer. It lingers because it is not about you alone. It is about the part of himself he keeps running from. And your silence has become the symbol of that part. For you, the question is never whether his possession is real. You see it in his eyes, in his unease, in his restless search for a reaction. The question is whether he can face what the silence demands of him. Can he grow into a man who no longer fears the absence of noise? Can he find solidity in himself instead of needing your words to anchor him? If he cannot, then his obsession will consume him, and his presence will only drain you. This is why silence is sacred. It is not merely a tactic, not a manipulation. It is the soul's filter. It separates the unready from the worthy, the shallow from the deep. A man who collapses under silence reveals he is still ruled by the child within. A man who steadies himself within, it reveals that he has begun the journey toward wholeness. And it is only the latter who can meet a woman in her full sovereignty. For when a woman embraces her silence, she ceases to bargain with her worth. She no longer spends her energy proving, persuading, or pleading. She understands what Seneca meant when he wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Your silence is that trial. And whether he emerges polished or shattered is not your responsibility. It is his fate. And so you remain unmoved, radiant in your restraint, allowing the silence to do what it always does, reveal. There is a moment when the weight of silence becomes unbearable for him. And this is the true unveiling. No longer can he pretend to be untouched. No longer can he hide behind bravado or rehearsed gestures. His composure falters, and in its place emerges something raw, either desperation or awakening. The silence strips away his armor, and what stands before you is not the man he pretended to be, but the man he truly is. This is why silence is feared, for it is the final judge. It does not flatter, it does not negotiate, it does not lie. It reveals, and what it reveals is often more than a man is prepared to face. He begins to realize that his worth cannot be extracted from your voice, that his identity cannot be secured by your constant response. In the absence of your validation, he must discover whether there is anything solid within himself. For some, this realization is too much. They flee, resenting you for the mirror you held. They call you cold, distant, unfeeling. But what they are truly naming is their own inability to stand in truth. They prefer noise because noise can drown out the shadows. They prefer constant reassurance because it spares them the responsibility of building their own foundation. To these men, your silence feels like cruelty, but it is not cruelty. It is clarity. And yet there are others, rare men who, when confronted by the silence, do not crumble but begin to awaken. They feel the discomfort, yes, but they do not run from it. Instead, they let it break them open. They allow the old self, fragile, dependent, restless, to die, and in its place a steadier self emerges. This man no longer needs to fill every void with noise, no longer panics at the stillness. He meets silence with silence, not in hostility, but in peace. This is the difference between possession and mastery. The man possessed by your silence reacts with compulsion, as if enslaved by what he cannot control. The man who grows through your silence responds with composure, as if he has found within himself the anchor he once sought in you. Jung would call this integration, the moment when shadow and self no longer war, but unite. And here lies the power that silence gives to you. It reveals the truth of who stands before you. Not the mask, not the performance, but the essence. It shows whether his love is obsession or devotion, whether his presence is hunger or strength. You need not interrogate him with questions. You need not test him with games. The silence tests him for you, and in this revelation, you are freed. For you see that you were never powerless in the quiet. You were sovereign. You were the one who chose not to fill the void, the one who refused to betray your essence for the sake of his comfort. And in that choice, you become untouchable. And so the silence reaches its final stage, no longer merely a force that unsettles him, but a truth that liberates you. What began as an absence has become revelation, and what began as discomfort has become sovereignty. For the silence has done its work. It has stripped away illusion, exposed shadow, and revealed who he truly is beneath the surface of his performance. In this unveiling, you discover the essence of your own power. For silence was never about withholding love, nor about manipulating response. It was about returning to yourself, about refusing to give away the sacred currency of your energy to those who have not earned it, about embodying what the Stoics taught, that the highest freedom is found not in being desired, but in not being dependent on desire at all. This is why a man is secretly possessed by your silence, because it proves a truth he cannot escape. You are whole without him. You are radiant without his validation. You are grounded without his approval. And he senses this, even if he cannot admit it. It is why he obsesses, why he lashes out, why he returns again and again to the echo of your stillness. It is not that you control him, but that your silence forces him to confront a life he has not yet mastered. Jung would call this confrontation with the shadow the path toward individuation. But not every man is willing to walk it. Some will flee into the arms of women who chatter away the silence, who soothe the wound with constant attention, who keep the ego fed but never force it to grow. Others, the rare few, will stay, not to break your silence, but to learn from it. They will discover within themselves a strength that does not require you to speak, a presence that can stand beside yours without fear. And you will know the difference. You will see with unshakable clarity who is ready to meet you in depth and who is only chasing the sound of his own echo. You will no longer confuse obsession for devotion, noise for connection, possession for love. For the silence will have revealed it all. This is the gift you carry as a woman, aligned with her worth. You do not need to chase. You do not need to convince. You do not need to surrender your essence to be chosen. You need only to remain steady, sovereign, whole. In your silence lies the power to unveil truth, to filter illusion, to protect your spirit from the unworthy. And in the end, this is the ultimate freedom. To know that your value does not depend on another's recognition. To know that silence itself can speak louder than any declaration. To know that you are not defined by the ones who fail, the test, but by the strength with which you hold the line. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.